Chapter 3 The Voyage of the Dawn Treader Summary. The voyage begins. Lucy Pevensie and Edmund Pevensie are sent to spend the summer with their aunt Alberta, Uncle Harold, and a cousin, Eustace Scrap, in Cambridge. His full name is Eustace Clarence Scrap, and he is sometimes called Eustace Clarence, but mostly just Eustace. The cousins dislike each other and have little in common. One afternoon, Eustace, who secretly likes bossing and bullying, walks in on his cousins in Lucy's room, where a painting of a Narnia ship hangs on the wall. Lucy and Edmund are discussing Narnia, and logical Eustace, who doesn't believe in such a place, makes fun of them for playing your old game. He soon chance took when the picture comes to life and the children find themselves magically swept into the scene and onto the ship, the Dawn Treader. Lucy and Edmund are delighted to be reunited with Caspian, who is still King Caspian, for a new adventure in Narnia, but Eustace is shocked and appalled and seasick. Eustace quickly acquires a reputation on board as a peevish, selfish, ungrateful complainer, and he is only tolerated because he is related to Lucy and Edmund. He also gets off on terrible footing with Repichip, the valiant talking mouse, after insulting his dignity by calling him a horrid thing. As they tour the ship, Lucy and Edmund catch up news from Caspian. While a year has passed in England, 3 have passed in Narnia at the time. Caspian has brought peace to the land. His mission now is to fulfill the oath he swore at his coronation, to find the 7 missing lords who were loyal to his father, King Caspian IX. Lord Revian, Lord Bran, Lord Argos, Lord Mabramon, Lord Octavian, Lord Restimer, and Lord Rup were sent away by the usurper Miraz to explore unknown lands at sea and never heard from again. The ship is en route to the Lone Island, the last known territory on the map, after which they will sail into unknown eastern waters in search of the noble lords. Repichip took longs for even more. Why should we not, he asks, come to every eastern end of the world? There he hopes to find Aslan's country, a lifelong dream since hearing of it in a nursery rhyme for his childhood, where sky and water meet, where the waves grow sweet, doth not Repichip. To find all you seek, there is the outer east. Meanwhile, Eustace begins keeping a diary in which he mostly complains and blames the others for his unhappiness. His problems are never his own fault, such as when he pulls Repichip's tail and is then somehow surprised when the irate mouse drops him with the flat of his sword. As the ship approached the Lone Island, a small party decided to visit the other island of Falmouth as a pleasant afternoon outing while the ship sails to the other side to pick them up. Caspian, Repichip, Lucy, Edmund, and Eustace disembark for their ramble, but are immediately captured by a band of slave traders. Caspian is shot on the spot to a noble lord and led away, and the others are taken aboard the slave ship anchored nearby. The nobleman turns out to be missing Lord Bern, who stayed behind in the Long Island to marry. He freely swears his allegiance to King Caspian and advises him on how to approach the Long Island. It has been many years since a Narnia king visited the island, and under the leadership of the corrupt governor Gumpas, the slave trade has flourished. Caspian and Ben returned to the Dawn Trader, where they devised a plan to rescue their friends. Ben sent a messenger ahead to the island that evening to put their plans into motion. Gloriously, they cut out for war. Its impressive crew armored to the hilt. The Dawn Trader sails to Nora Haven the next day. Cheering crowds greet them. Thanks to the advance forward of Lord Bern's messenger, Caspian's ship's captain Lord Gernian and the rest of the crew marched to the castle. They demand an audience with Governor Gumpas, who tries unsuccessfully to slave trade has been permitted there. Gumpas demurs on both points, so Caspian relieves him from office and appoints Lord Bern to govern in his place. The crew then heads to the slave market, where Caspian proclaims the end of the slave trade and frees all the slaves. Lucy, Edmund, Repeatship, and Estas are rescued, and a feast is held the night to celebrate. The Dawn Trader is also repaired and restocked with provisions, ready to sail again in search of the remaining lot. Into the unknown. The ship sails its once more, but is pummeled by a brutal storm that lasts for nearly 2 weeks. The ship's mast is lost, and the crew is then stuck motionless for several days under the scorching sun, with no wind to propel them forward. Water rations grow short, and Estas is caught red-handed by Repeatship as he tries to dip into the water softly late one night. The boy is forced to apologize and loathes everyone more than ever. At last, they sight land, and the whole crew goes ashore to resupply the ship and make repairs. Estas, tired of constant work, slips away to spend a lazy afternoon on his own. He hikes far up a mountain where a thick fog overtakes him. Lest he stumble down the wrong path, trying to return to the ship, and finds himself in a scorched valley. He nearly panics as a listless dragon crawls out of a cave nearby, only to die in front of him. Relieved is Estas ducks into the cave to escape the rain and finds a glorious stash of treasure. He puts on a golden bracelet and falls asleep atop a pile of coins. Estas awakens to the shocking discovery that he has been magically transformed into a dragon. He weeps for the loss of his friend, realizing he is now a monster cut off from the whole human race. He flies back to the coast, where the crew has been searching for him. Unable to speak, the dragon uses gestures such as nodding and shaking his head to convince the others that it is he. Estas. He also cries because the bracelet which fit so nicely over his human arm, is now cutting into his dragon flesh. The crew recognized that the bracelet bears the insignia of Lord Actaeon, one of the missing lords of their quest, and they realize he has probably dead on the island. Lucy uses her cudgel to relieve the swelling and pain, but the bracelet will not come off. In the week that follows, a humbled Estes is more helpful than he's ever been, using his size and strength to retrieve a new tree for a mast and to hunt for wild goats to restock the ship's provisions. Even so, it is a lonely week, for he cannot easily share space with his companions. To his surprise, it is Sir Perchip who offers comfort, keeping him company on lonely nights while others gather by the fire. As Astas overhears, the other wonder aloud what to do about him when the ship must depart. He understands what an unmitigated nuisance he has been all along, and now he's causing even more problems for the crew. On the sixth morning since they arrived at the island, Edmund awakens to find Estes restored to his old self, thanks to Aslan. Estes relates how the great lion had led him into the mountains to a bubbling well. Then, like a snake shedding its skin, Aslan had helped Estes shed his dragon scales and become a boy once more. Upon bathing in the water, his pain vanished, and Estes was able to return to the ship. Penitent, he apologized to Edmund for his previous behavior. Edmund accepts his apology and points out that he himself was far worse on his first visit to Narnia. You were only an ass. Edmund says, but I was a traitor. The crew's next adventure takes place under sail, where the ship is attacked by a giant sea serpent that nearly crushes the boat into splinters. After a narrow escape, they sail onward and come upon a rocky, mountainous island with two streams coursing down the slopes. While Lord Drinian oversees the task of revealing the water cask at one stream, the children Caspian and Ripperchip hike to the other stream to investigate. They find a man dressed in sword and armor in a field above a lake and speculate that the item might have belonged to one of missing lords. Unsettling, they continue to the lake. Beneath the wave lies a life-size gold statue man, and the party discovers that the water turns whatever it touches to gold. The statue must surely be one of the missing lords. They decide. Caspian speaks excitedly about the riches the island could bring to Narnia, but Edmund chafes when Caspian comments their silence. Who are you talking to? Edmund demands. I'm no subject of yours. Even Lucy stops name calling until they all catch sight of Aslan on the hill nearby. His presence brings them back to themselves, and they hurriedly return to the ship. They name the island Deathwater, revealing only that they discovered the body of one of the remaining lords, which one they do not know. Lucy accepts a challenge. The ship next journeys to a strange silent island where manicured lawns and rose trees greet them empty of inhabitation. Also, it seems as a small group sets forth to investigate a house in the distance. Lucy falls behind to remove a rock from her shoe. Phantoms fill the air and pass by Lucy, who is concealed behind a tree she can see no one. Lucy hears voices plotting to ambush her friends on their return to the ship. As the voices fade into the distance, Lucy scrambles here to warn the others they decide to face there would be attackers directly and return to shore at once. Sure enough, they are confronted on the beach by the invisible people, and their chief calls on Lucy to complete dangerous mission on their behalf. The chief explains that on the island lives a magician who had cursed them with ugliness. In fact, they felt so ugly that they sneak into his home and use his spell book to turn themselves invisible so they wouldn't have to look at one another anymore. They are now weary of invisibility, however, and only a girl, Lucy, can break the spell. To do so, she must enter the magician's home and read the spell to make them visible once more. The voices threaten to slay the entire party if Lucy refuses. Seeing no alternative and also wanting to help Lucy agrees to the challenge. Delighted, the invisible people host a feast for their now guests and invite them to spend the night. The next morning, Lucy returns to the house and following the chief's instructions, she finds the magician's spellbook. As she turns each page of the enchanting volume, Lucy becomes more and more intrigued. She is sorely tempted to recite a spell that would make her beautiful beyond the lot of mortals. But Aslan's snarling face appears in the book and she quickly turns the page. Further on top, she writes a spell to learn what her friends truly think of her. The pictures on the page come to life and Lucy witnesses a conversation between her schoolmates Marjorie and Annie. Lucy is deeply hurt to overhear Marjorie and reads it aloud. Marjorie makes light of her friendship with Lucy and decides not to lessen it on any of her other friends. Finally, she finds the proper spell and reads it aloud in the moment Aslan appears, having been in the room all along, invisible. He chastises Lucy for eavesdropping on her friends, but Lucy has had punishment enough. I don't think I'll ever be able to forget what I heard. Here, say, she laments, no you won't, he Idris. Aslan then introduces her to the magician, an old man named Korikian, whom the lion has appointed as the guardian of the island's curious inhabitants. Aslan departs and the two have lunch while the magician tells Lucy the whole story behind those inhabitants, the Duffelbach, or Duffers, who are not very bright. In fact, they are like naive children in many respects, easily swayed by the silly self and with little common sense or intelligent thought among them. Korea can relates how the Duffers have previously planted boiled potatoes west the dishes before dinner and fetched water from a half mile away, even took a stream runs right by the garden. Fed up with their disobedience to his kindly logical instruction, the magician had transformed them from dwarfs into monopods, people with one centered leg and one long foot. Lucy and Korea can then watch as the duffel pets awaken from their afternoon nap to learn they are visible once more, and Lucy goes out to meet them and rejoin her friends. She assures the duffers that she loves the way they look, and repeatedly teaches them how to paddle on the water using their long foot as boat, which they adore. That night the crew dines with the magician and learns that only four of the missing lots arrived on his island many years ago. The Lord unaccounted for was Ristemeyer, who must have been the man to turn to gold in the deep water. The ship sails away the next day, escorted to open water by the cheering, paddling duffel-bats. The end in sight. Farther east, the ship approaches a mysterious darkness hanging over the water, and separate on by fearless refugees, they sail into the eerie black mass. A voice cries out to them in the darkness, and they rescue a frazzled, white-haired man, whose white eyes tell of the terrors he has endured. They have arrived at the island where dreams come true. But not their dreams. Real dreams immediately fear takes out of the crew, and they row for their life with other might. Just as it seems they are lost in the darkness, Lucy prays to Aslan for help, and a luminous albatross arrives to lead them to the sun once more. The rescued man, crying with joy at escaping the cursed island, reveals himself as the missing Lord Rook. On the final island, the crew visit to find a grand fish-laden table with three strange men asleep in stone chairs. The missing lords, Rebellions, Argos, and Mabramon. So long have they slept that their hair nearly covers their entire bodies. Afraid to touching the tempting food which could be enchanted, most of the crew returns to the ship for the night to escape the ominous magical atmosphere that surrounds the table. They pitched to talk decides to sit at the table until dawn, for this a very great adventure. The children and Caspian join Repichip, and they watch the unfamiliar stars drift by overhead. After many hours, a beautiful young woman emerges from a door in her hillside and approaches them carrying a candy. Its light falls upon a stone knife which no one has noticed before on the table. It is the knife the White Witch used to slay Aslan long ago. The woman reveals then that the three lords were in altercated when, during an argument on whether to sail onward, one of them snatched up the knife. She urged the party to eat from Aslan's table and repeated, "Take the risk," first raising a glass to the lady and digging into some cold pickle. The others then ate too, as she explained that the table is a gift from Aslan to all travelers who have come so far. Its food and drink is cleared away and magically renewed each day. Now the lady's father Ramandu Evers and his daughter greet the silence with a song. A flock of white birds arrives from the east, singing the same song, and they pick the table clean and the dead part. Ramandu advises the party that to break the spell over the Lord, they must sail to the world's end and there lives one of their crew never to return. It is Ripperchip's dearest wish, and he volunteers readily. All present are resolved to continue onward to break the spell over the Lord. They also learned that Ramandu and also Karyakin were on star shining in the sky, and that one day he will again take his place there. Take his place there. The ship's crew now approaches, asking about a possible return to Narnia, since all the Lord have been found enticed by the magical beast. Many sailors wish to winter on the island and then sail home in the spring. The sailor Reinelf reminds them of the bosses they met at the outset of the voyage, of their thirst for adventure, and therefore to reach the very end of the world. Caspian then turns the tables on the reluctant crew by declaring that only some of them will be allowed to journey forward on this marvelous voyage. And those who will return heroes, levied with riches and honors. In the end, about one of the crew is chosen to go onward. Piton Cream, who volunteers at the last second to go only because he doesn't want to be left alone, he is rejected. He remains on the island of the star, lonely and imagining himself at sea with the crew of the Dawn Trader. Lord Rope too remains on the island, gracefully placed into a deep and dreamless sleep by Ramandu to sleep alongside his companions of old. The final leg of the voyage is where it begins at each day. The light grows stronger and the sun appears larger. The water becomes extraordinarily clear, and on the seafloor, Lucy's Pierce and underwater world an array of fierce sea people as their king shakes a spear that threateningly at the boat. Ripperchip dives into the water to accept his challenge. He forgets all about the sea people when he discovers the water is sweet, flowing a line from the childhood nursery rhyme that has drawn him hitherto, where the waves grow sweet. Doubt not, Ripperchip, there is the other is. He is rescued from the water, and the ship sails onward, leaving the sea people behind. The crew begins to drink. The crew begins to drink the water each day and finds they no longer need to eat or to sleep. The water which Repichip calls drinkable light also helps their eyes to adjust to the ever-brightening sun. There is no wine. The ship is carried by a swift current until they sail into a vast, calm sea of white lilies in the bloom, which they name the Silver Sea. The sea becomes shallow, and at last they reach a point where the ship can go no farther. Repichip, Edmund, Lucy, and Estas bid farewell to their friends and pily into the rowboat. It is time for the children to return home. And for Repichip to fulfill his destiny by reaching the world and Caspian reluctantly stays on board, reminded sternly by Aslan of his duty to return to Narnia, and also persuaded by the memory of Ramando's beautiful daughter, whom he later marries. The current carries the rowboat out of the sight down thither, turning homeward, and the children and the Repichips come to a shimmering wall of water, truly the end of their world, and the rowboat runs aground. Beyond the wave, they view the sun and the mountains of Aslan's country. Repichip bids them goodbye and patties his own small boat over the wave, disappearing from sight. The spell is broken over the sleeping lodge on Ramandu's island, and they awaken. The children wade through the water along the wave and come to a low grass land where they come upon a white lamb. They breakfast with the lamb, who transforms into Aslan. He reveals that there is a way into his own country from the children's world, and that Lucy and Edmund will never return to Narnia. Lucy is sad they shall never meet Aslan again, but he assures them that he is in their world too. But there I have another name. He then opens a door in the sky, and the children return to Estas' home in Cambridge.